Hey guys, welcome to this video. So this is going to be a little bit different than I normally do. I seen a video and I noticed myself making a lot of comments during the video. So I decided to make a talking point video commentary like a lot of people do, and I think it'd be fun to throw up and see what happens. So let's get to it. See you there. Alright, we're going to be taking a look at how NASCAR was faster than Ferrari at Le Mans. I watched a little bit of it. Like I said, I was making some comments, and I think it would be kind of fun to just do a reaction video to it. So anyways, let's get to it.
Look at this. Yep, that's a NASCAR stock car competing with GTs and prototypes at Le Mans. And they were quicker than Ferrari, Aston Martin and Porsche. It's a next-gen Camaro that has been adapted to work at Le Mans. But if you missed it, you might be a bit confused about how this came about. NASCAR has changed a lot recently with newer, more aerodynamic cars, just like in the movie Jackson Storm.
What, like Cars 3?
Yeah. Centre-lock wheel nuts rather than the lug nuts that they used to run. They've even moved to more F1-looking tyres rather than the old-style tall sidewall ones. Also adding a rear diffuser, typical on other race cars, but very new for stock cars.
I just wanted to say, I've personally seen with my own eyes the center lock wheel nuts. I don't know how many people have, and it seems like to me, if you are not careful and you've doing it for the first time, it is very easy to cross thread the hell out of that, and just you're fucked. You're gonna have to replace something really expensive at that point, because you can't just get like a wreath. You can't get a tap and die that big usually.
But one of the bigger changes is that they're running more road courses than they used to, racing at tracks like Circuit of the Americas, Watkins Glen, and a favourite of mine, the Charlotte Roval. So, stock cars aren't just for turning left, and they've shown that in recent seasons. But not in the same way that GT cars or prototypes can handle Le Mans for 24 hours though, right? So NASCAR teamed up with Hendrick Motorsports to take a ZL1 Camaro stock car to Le Mans, taking a £3,000 stock car with no doors, no headlights, and a 5.8 litre rumbling V8 to Le Mans. It seems absolutely
big boy.
bonkers. And many fans were excited to see a NASCAR race at Le Mans, and many were not.
I've had a lot of drivers say, why are you doing this? What do you get out of it? Fun. What's the point otherwise? If you're not smiling, what's the point of doing it?
Lots of
Can you imagine being that guy that goes to the race? Like, it's Le Mans. You're paid the big fucking money. You're paid. You are in the top 1% amount paid of drivers. And you get there and like, fuck, I gotta do another race. God damn it, I'm here again. Here we go. It's like, why? Yeah, you're there for 24 hours. If you're not there for fun, why the fuck are you doing it? And then it's like, people look down on the car. It's like, immediately, because it's a NASCAR, and all that comes to mind is I think they're going to do shake and bake, and then just go shake and bake straight into the fucking wall because they can't turn right. I love just hearing people's stereotypes of the actual NASCARs and not realizing how much goes into these cars. It's insane.
people were concerned that the car would keep up on the straights, but be a moving chicane through the corners. The Le Mans organisers even proposed waving a white flag at every marshal post the car drove past to warn other classes it was there. And this is literally the flag that marshals wave to warn you that a crashed or broken car is slowly driving back to the pits. And that's a bit insulting, really, and I'm not sure the marshals would have been keen either. But they were so wrong about the 24 cars pace, but we'll get to that in a little while. So they assembled the team for it, recruiting Mike Rockenfeller, Le Mans winner with Audi, the NASCAR legend Jimmy Johnson, and Jenson Button. And that's quite a lineup. And they were quick.
Oh, I love that
under
picture.
the Garage 56 entry, the experimental entry that we've seen a few times before.
I wonder if that was the Le Mans winner. He's probably never been in a NASCAR before, or even in a stock car. Again, something else I have experience with. I come from a dirt. My family comes from a dirt track racing background. I personally haven't raced, but I've been in and out of, helped work on, and seen these race cars firsthand throughout my life. And stock cars, I used to go to the Indy 500. I've been to the Brickyard, and they have displays. You can get in the cars. And it is such an odd experience if you've never done it. And trust me, it is... The best way to explain it is you're getting in this thing and you're like, why the fuck don't I just open the door? Oh, there's no door. It feels so wrong, and then you just, for the next week, you just want to get in and out of every car, just going through the fucking window.
4. You might remember the Delta Wing, and we made a video about that as well. So although
It looks like a penis.
at Le Mans, it would technically be in its own class, subjecting it to special rules. So, for example, no matter where they qualified, they would still have to start at the back of the pack. Now, although NASCAR race on road circuits, a stock car would be a fair way off the pace compared to a GTE car, let alone an LMP2 or hypercar. So Hendrick Motorsports and Garage 56 set to work on developing a stock car that could work at Le Mans. They had big aspirations, hoping to beat some of the GTE cars. And these are cars that have been developed for years to be incredible at Le Mans, with lots of downforce but very low drag, something that you need at Le Mans due to the long straights. Le Mans is actually pretty unique as it has several super long straights, but also fast sweeping corners and super tight chicanes. Aerodynamic efficiency is everything at Le Mans. So, what did they do? Well, the first thing was that the car didn't need to conform to any rulebook. The standard engine restrictions that apply in NASCAR came off. So in Cup racing, the engine runs at 510 horsepower on the fast tracks and 670 horsepower everywhere else. But Hendrick Motorsports got the engine up to about 750 horsepower.
That's it? I expected more. Because, like, can you imagine taking, for instance, let's just take a NASCAR legend, Dale Earnhardt, right? You take somebody like him, or even somebody from my neck of the woods, Tony Stewart. He owns Bristol. He's from dirt tracks racing. Funny enough, he actually raced for my family back in his early days of his career. And so if you think about the fact, if you take these guys that probably have been around these high horsepower motors, and they're only getting a 750, I'm pretty sure you can get no turbo, naturally aspirated V10s that are fucking 1,000 horsepower. And they only want the 750. They probably didn't need to do much more. But it's like, come on, you've got no restrictions at this point. Go big or go home, right?
That's 150 more than the 600 horsepower that the GTE cars generally run. But they could have actually got more out of it if it weren't for one thing. The engine normally runs for 500 miles or so before a rebuild, whereas in a 24-hour race, this engine would need a life cycle of around 5,000 miles. So they capped the RPM limit a little lower to reduce stress on the valve train. But the fundamental components of the engine stayed exactly the same as the stock car. And that meant that it sounded absolutely awesome. Just listen
NASCAR
to
boom tubes
compared to the other cars. The rear-mounted transaxle gearbox was the same as the stock car, but with one difference. They ran a Formula 1 style steering wheel with paddle shift rather than the sequential stick shift on the stock car. Now, with all that power, the issue of stopping the car became a problem. So they swapped the usual steer brakes that don't get used a whole bunch on a stock car and swapped them for full carbon brakes. The aero package was all to create as much downforce as possible without losing the NASCAR look of the car. They could have added an enormous rear wing to the car, but decided that's not the NASCAR way. So they stuck with a spoiler, but made it absolutely enormous. The result was that the car created 50% more downforce than its next-gen counterpart. And one other thing they kept the same was the lack of doors. So during the pit stops, 50%. The drivers were climbing through the windows. Oh, and the pit crew were also keeping up with the GTE teams, despite not having air jacks and using a manual jack. Goodyear worked with the team to create a new as well. They understood that the car would be...
Can you imagine going to the fucking... pulling into the pits, right? And you're sitting there. It's like, oh, these NASCAR guys, they're over there, those hillbillies over in America, they can't keep up with us. They can't touch us. We got our air jacks and all this other shit. Because half of these cars, their jacks like pop out from underneath them, and they just like, they lift up the car from underneath automatically. And you think about that. These guys are over here with manual jacks lifting it up by themselves, and they're still beating you. Imagine the shame, and you just be slower still, because you ain't gonna be like, because if they're beating you with manual jacks, or you got the automatics, can you imagine the amount of like the hurt feelings out of that. You're gonna have people being like, that guy's a NASCAR mechanic. He works in a pit crew in NASCAR. Get him over here. Let's see how he does. And you're just gonna have some guys getting, because NASCAR pit crews are paid insanely good money for what they do. And can you imagine being like, oh, I'm being paid. So like, I think the salary difference would be making $50,000 a year here in America. I could go over to Europe and work on these fancy cars and make $200,000 a year. And it's like, because half of the NASCAR guys will just do laps around these guys if they're beating them with manual jacks. So it's insane.
Super rear limited, with the hard traction zones at Le Mans as well as the fast corners. So if they ran the standard Cup tyre, they would have to pit twice as often as the GTE cars. So Goodyear designed a custom tyre that's 2 inches wider at the rear. They also had a super clever tyre temperature sensor that is laminated into the tyres rather than the wheel rim. It's lighter and it's more accurate in the data that it delivers. This car is really a test bed for new technology. Then there was the biggest task. The Cup car runs at just under 1,500 kilos, and for a race car, that is a lot. A full 300 kilos heavier than the GTE cars and 500 kilos heavier than the hypercars. So the team shed 220 kilograms from the car. They're getting super clever with materials. Firstly, there are a load of things that this car just doesn't need. Stock cars have special reinforced structures at the front and rear of the car, allowing them to bump draft, where one car can sit in the slipstream with less drag and it actually pushes the car in front forwards. It allows two cars to work together, and it's super common in oval racing.
Shake and bake, buddy!
Then they swap lots of panels for carbon fibre rather than the steel. Goodyear even cut down the weight of each tyre. And also, there was one other thing. This car had to have headlights, and we all know that stock cars run stickers. And the car drove well. It was clear that this Camaro could be a real match for the GTE cars, which to many was a real surprise.
I have to say, it's pretty fun to drive. It's really fun to drive. You know, I think a lot of people were scared at how slow it would be through the Porsche curves.
Then, with a bit more work before qualifying, the Camaro out-qualified the entire GTE field. Jenson Button set a time of 3 minutes 47.9, a proper quick time around this circuit, with the fastest GTE setting a time of 3 minutes and 51. Now,
he did it 4 seconds faster. That, just for reference, in racing, that is an eternity almost. I don't know if it's different in Le Mans. Most of the time, in, for instance, stock car racing, that's still a big gap, I believe. It's been a while since I've been in the racing scene, but to me that just seems like that's a big gap. But can you imagine? You're like, you show up at Le Mans, you're there for Ferrari, for instance. Ferrari or Aston Martin. You're there and you're like, oh, this NASCAR, this American, I'm going to crush it. They've got this Camaro here. It ain't nothing for my V10, I think they're V10 Ferrari. And then it just like, you get destroyed in the lap times. Can you imagine how pissed the guys in the VIP seats at Le Mans are once they found out the time difference? Only if the Garage 56 actually counted, because I don't think it counts towards the I don't think it actually counts towards the standings because you're in experimental class. But imagine if it did. I mean, the numbers are still there. They're public. But can you imagine the racing in Le Mans and stuff like this, if NASCAR branches out into these other motorsports, which I would love to see personally? I would love to see racing companies like Hendricks and a couple others just be like, you know what? We've got the money. We've got the cars. Let's see if, touring cars. Let's see what happens if we get our NASCAR in there. They talk to Chevy and they go, all right, Chevy, we're going into the touring cars. Because I think Chevy and Ford already have touring cars. But you get a NASCAR team involved in that, if they aren't already. And they're like, you know what? We're stepping this up. Because they're going to see how much news and how much publicity this got them. And it's like, We went from barely anybody knowing that we're in the European circuit here at Ford to now they know we're part of NASCAR, and NASCAR was at Le Mans and did exceedingly well. We're going to now develop a touring car out of this, and the amount of people that are going to be drawn to NASCAR itself. So you've now got people that are like, hey, this NASCAR did amazingly well. I thought they just turned left in NASCAR. What if they could do that? What can they do else on the track? And they're going to have people watching NASCAR now. So if you think about it, I would think it'd be kind of funny to find out. You go to the Brickyard 500, and you see some guy roll up in a fucking Ferrari, and you're like, "What the hell are you doing here?" I seen it at Le Mans. I wanted to see what it's like here. Because if you've ever gone there, as long as you aren't going to be dumb, it ain't all trailer trash sitting in the middle of the racetrack, and you're just going to have these people that would have never thought to take a step into this kind of world with NASCAR, being like, I want to give it a shot now, and just see what they find. It's going to be insane.
That is impressive. But there's one thing I need to make clear. The GTE field are a closely regulated pack.
The McDonald's
with
logo.
Regulations on aero, power, tyres, the lot. And the NASCAR was completely free of regulation. And the GTE field has a balance of performance, BOP, where limits are put on weight, power, fuel load, and more to make sure all the very different GTE cars are super close in performance. And really the only limit on the Garage 56 car was that the team wanted it to look like a NASCAR. So bear that in mind. Now that incredible qualifying performance caused an issue. The rules of the Garage 56 entry say that they should start at the back of the pack, with the order being Hypercar, LMP2, GTE, then Garage 56. But given the pace difference, they were concerned about the carnage of the NASCAR coming through the field in the first few laps. So they let the car start between the GTEs and the LMP2s. And on the race start, the NASCAR absolutely left the GTE field, and even overtook a couple of LMP2 cars. The car absolutely flew in the traction zones and on the first half of the straights, but the aero wasn't quite as efficient at the end of the straights, meaning that the GTEs caught them up, but braking was their main issue.
Braking is probably the area that's the toughest for us. It's a big thing to try and stop into these.
Oh yeah.
Looking so
huge.
unusual, the car was a massive fan favourite, with many fans saying you could hear the car coming for miles, with many complaining that it was the car keeping them awake through the night. So the car worked well at the start of the race, but then Le Mans did its thing. It absolutely tipped down with cars skidding off everywhere. The Garage 56 car held on, because despite the tyres, the aero and the lower weight, this thing was a handful. You could see it was super sketchy on braking through the corner and also on the exit. But you find that cars with more power than grip are just a real handful. But if balanced really well, they can be...
I'm sorry for pausing so much, but all that came to mind is, I'm on fire. You're not on fire, Ricky Bobby. I'm on fire.
be incredibly fun to drive. But later in the race, they had their first big issue. The gearbox exploded. All that power had destroyed the gearbox entirely, with it sounding absolutely dreadful. Just listen to this.
Shit.
And this was the NASCAR out, because you're not allowed to swap a gearbox at Le Mans. But after asking nicely, the team actually were allowed to swap it, as they were the experimental entry. So after an hour in the garage, the car was back out there. But this problem had pushed them back to 39th overall before finishing the race. And just like the Delta Wing, Le Mans had provided the perfect place to try something bonkers in the hope of pushing.
I'm leaving the penis car on the screen. Anyways, so I didn't realize there was all those restrictions that are taken off of them, but still, think about it this way. They did this well. The gearbox, man, and trust me, if you're taking a gearbox that's meant for the Brickyard 500, which is a couple hours race, and you're doing 24 hours on it, it's going to break. But if now that they've got this info, if they go back for next year or the year after that, there might be a new class. Maybe they try to fit in the GTE class, because the thing is, you got to be a manufacturer. Well, they're Chevy Camaro. They technically can fit into these classes. So the what class are they going to go in next? So they come next year. They're probably not going to go into the Garage 56, because there's going to be other people voting for it. Granted, NASCAR brought a big enough crowd that they might get it next time, but it's going to be insane. Just the Google next year is going to be all about NASCAR probably. There's going to be questions if they show up, and just the interviews of drivers is going to be insane. I can't wait for next year's Le Mans time to roll around and just see what happens. I didn't know they were in. I seen this on my feeds and was just blown away by what I was seeing and the amazingness, because I just love the fact of you hear the Ferrari go by and everyone says Ferraris sound amazing. Well, at least my past. Every time I've ever heard a Ferrari engine, I love the sound of them. But nothing matches NASCAR boom tubes going by, because you hear that Ferrari, it's kind of loud, and you just hear the NASCAR boom tubes right behind it, straight out the headers. I think it's V8 they said? Yeah, V8 straight out the headers. American Eagle, nothing like it. Anyways, hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.